Hi everyone, very much welcome to the Stockholm School of Economics. It's great to see new faces and faces I noticed beforehand. Our alumni, some of which have been suffering from this kind of teaching several years ago. And the purpose of tonight is that I will spend some 45, 50, 52 minutes talking, and then I hope we have a discussion. And the purpose today is to, first I will give you a very condensed version of how I view marketing, or my marketing philosophy, because marketing is a hot subject nowadays. And just as Andrei reminded me of, humans are strange creatures, and sometimes we tend to do things we don't believe, and some marketers, they use that. So the concept is controversial, but also interesting, I think. And then I will go on to display 10 tendencies which I see around us in the business community, 10 tendencies which affect marketing a lot in my view. And those are, of course, not the unique tendencies. You can choose something else, but I've chosen 10 of them. And you're likely to recognize the majority, I think. And hopefully, me showing them could provoke some reflections how they affect society and marketing as such. And if I understand Anna and Grisha right regarding the pedagogy here, the best thing is that I talk during these hours and then we save questions for afterwards, because then it's easier for our audience not being here, who is also very much welcome to interact with us. That's the whole purpose of the webinar, as far as I recall. And for those who haven't seen me before, my background is in the pharmaceutical industry before joining SSE, and then SSE Russia. I've been the dean for 10 years, and I'm a faculty member teaching marketing occasionally, and I'm an associate professor of marketing in Stockholm. When I'm not in Russia, that was some time ago. And I am very thrilled to be in Russia as always. You will notice some Russian examples tonight, and I tell everyone that as a marketing person, I learn a lot in Russia, because here you see by far the worst examples of marketing I've ever seen in my life. Extremely primitive, okay? Displaying naked women on cars, etc., etc. But you also see the most elegant, the smartest things in Russia, right? So both of them is extremely inspiring to be here and to learn marketing, just being a consumer in this country. So as Anna said, it's the 1st September. It's very, I think, symbolic to get the chance to host all of you here. Really, I'm impressed that so many turned up. So once again, very much welcome, and let's get going. So basically then, first I will talk some about the bricks of my marketing philosophy, because as a scholar you have got, let's say, some things you believe in and things you do not believe in. I'll give you just my philosophy here. And then we will come into these 10 trustworthy topical tendencies. And I've given them some symbols here, so you can more easily follow the presentation as it unfolds. And if time allows us, and time is not my best friend when I teach, so it will not, but if we get more time, we can also talk about some models of marketing towards the end. We'll see. So first of all, I see basically three, let's say, fundamental ways into marketing. If we are, let's say, business people with brains, reading books, trying to understand the world around us, we could jump into marketing with three principal angles as I see it. What is very common is that we learn about the concept of marketing from the strategy framework. Strategy is very often much more sexy than marketing. And when you go out and you ask McKinsey, Boston Consulting, whatever they are called, they're not going to talk a lot about marketing. They're going to talk about strategy. What's the problem with strategy if we are marketing people? Well, the problem is that competition is the focus, and customers are hardly mentioned. Okay, I exaggerate a little bit, but this is where many people end up. Okay, so they only see customers as something being secondary to competition. Okay, I'm not saying it's wrong, even though I do not see the world this way. It's one alternative. A second alternative for those who are a bit more keen to learn more about marketing is the so-called marketing management framework with Philip Kotler's 4P, the 4P framework. This is what you get if you attend any basic marketing class in any small village or city around the world. Here, basically, the philosophy says that customers are managed. As suppliers, we decide upon price, promotion, and place and product, and the customer passively reacts to that. Okay, it's traditional marketing, very American, packaged in the 1950s and so forth, emerged from microeconomics. Okay, absolutely no problem with that, but that is not what I subscribe to. And all of those who went into our programs, I hope you do not subscribe to this either, or at least you know there is an alternative. And the alternative I label the benefit framework, punish, down. So, where customers are understood, and here the argument is we have to start by understanding the customer, okay, or the consumer. Otherwise, there's no idea to move further. And there is a quote here saying that marketing strategy is based on segmentation, positioning, etc. Marketing mix decisions are only secondary. So you start here by understanding the customer, the consumer, then only you can take these decisions for marketing and then the strategy. Okay? So you follow, either you can go this way or this way. As a marketing person, I see the world as a better place when we start out here. But that's my view. This said, what about marketing then as a, let's say, feature of society? Well, I think marketing is highly problematic. And that is also why it's so damn interesting. I myself have a background in finance. And with all my preach for finance, it's pretty straightforward if I exaggerate. This is not straightforward, which makes it much more intriguing. And judging finance, if we don't have any customers, what to do with finance? There's no money to play with, right? So once again, we start here. Why is marketing problematic in my view? Well, first of all, if we ask ourselves here, we have 55 different opinions what marketing is. Okay? And what is strange is that those with no training in marketing tend to be the ones who know the most. Quite interesting. Yes, everyone thinks they know it. And if you ask people in the street, the typical answer what is marketing is advertising. Right? Of course, advertising is part of communications. Communication is part of marketing, but So, another reason why it's problematic is that sometimes people think it's very, very sexy, very, very cool to work with marketing. And sometimes people look upon it very dirty, being the epitome of a rude society of ours, right? So people have opinions about it. There are authors who claim that marketing destroys society. They force upon us products we don't need. Others say that without marketing, we don't understand each other. So, and we can find ourselves anywhere between these two positions. So it affects society values in a way not always accepted. Very much. Another reason why it's problematic is that it's got roots from very many disciplines, economists, psychologists, sociologists. So many different, let's say, academic areas, they pretend to be part of marketing. And maybe it's not so relevant in all contexts. Maybe sometimes we forget about marketing business. I don't know. In class in May, we discussed what about Gazprom. And we had some participants, they say Gazprom, they don't care at all about consumers. And I said, I don't know. Okay? Someone else said that Algidea is a typical example of a non-marketing kind company. I don't agree, because I know they try, because this is one of our major customers actually, and we teach them marketing. And absolutely. So next time you go on Sapsan and they are nice to you, think of us, okay? And what about our school? Should we deal with marketing at all? Well, sometimes we try to understand people who participate in our programs. In fact, that's the core. Otherwise, we would be dead. But typically, if you look into higher education, it doesn't care about the audience. It's very supply-oriented. If I now happen to be a big bang Swedish professor in marketing, why should I care about if Ludmila doesn't get my message? It's her problem. That's a typical traditional one, right? So I think that higher education could be much, much better in listening around. And for instance, now, if the situation of Stockholm School of Economics in general is interesting, because we were used to a world that was regulated in higher education, only Swedish one. Now the higher education market is global. So at SSE, we are no longer sure that we get the best Swedish students, because they travel abroad. So not only do we want to get the best bachelor students for our school in Stockholm, but we want to keep the ones we have. And when I started 900 years ago in Stockholm got the best students, sitting like this, except for me, but I was lucky to get in. So. Anyway, so it is problematic. And now I'm going to show you a small clip, a small thing from YouTube. And this is going to be the most Swedish contribution of tonight. Otherwise, we're going to do mostly in Russia. This is about the retail of alcoholic beverages. And those of you who have been to Sweden know that you can't buy this 24 hours a day, and you have to go to designated stores. We have got a retail monopoly in Sweden for political reasons. There's a restrictions. Why do we have restrictions? We used to have a big drinking problem 80 years ago, and we decided to monopolize the retail. And in this small clip, you will see an initial sentence, and the lady who says these things, she's store manager in this Systembolaget in a shop. And she says, he is one of the world's most prestigious shopping experts. It will be really interesting to find out what he thinks about us. So she's talking about someone. Okay? You will also find this posted in one of the shops. Tag 3, betala 2. It means take 3, pay for 2. And finally, you will find the clip saying that the Swedish way of selling alcoholic beverages is a bit different. But it saves some 2,000 lives annually. So let's have a look at the clip now, if the force is with us.
Han är en av världens främsta butiksexperter. Det ska bli så spännande att höra vad han tycker om oss.
This store has great potential.
Thank you.
But there's room for improvement. For example, the range. It's too wide. Minimize selection, increase profit. Most people only buy the top sellers.
Okay, this is your store now. The customer can come from the entrance right to the checkout. If you do it this way, you keep them in the store, they will buy more. And you should have special offers.
Check this out.
Your end caps. According to market research, it's the best location in the store for sales. And, well, yours are empty. This is how you should do it. And impulse buys at checkout.
As you can see, there's a lot we can do to increase profit.
And that is what it's all about, right?
No, not for us.
You.
So, this was our American friend visiting Systembolaget. And then, of course, you could ask yourself, what about marketing in this context? Does it have a place or not? It's worthwhile. In fact, Systembolaget is one of the major buyers of advertising in Sweden. And one of the campaigns basically is do not drink too much. So they argue against, or they argue we should drink responsibly. But that's, of course, a very different way from what our American friend tried to sort out with his ladies in the shop. So, two very talented use of marketing. You might recognize, some of you, this No Logo by Naomi Klein. This argument tells that marketing is at the heart of everything evil, especially branding deceives consumers. I'm not saying she's right or wrong, I'm just showing it. Another way is this Danish guy called Martin Lindström. He wrote a book about brand sense. Well, he argues that the only way to compete with the Chinese is through the smell, because you can't cook it, and so forth. So, I'm going to wrap up this part now by some conclusions. I think that there's a lot to do out there in the area of marketing, despite the fact people perceive that it's so simple. And this ignorance is oftentimes not noted. And often big companies are also very ignorant in this area. And if I were a business person, I would try to understand a few powerful models that matter the most. And the same goes for what is written. And some of my former students here might recognize this thing. This is a piece of writing from the 19th century about the theory of the leisure class by a sociologist in 1898. Reading this and grasping it, you know basically the marketing you need, in my view. Start out to understand yourself as a consumer. That's very often the best way to talk about marketing in your own organization. How would I react? Which would be my views here? And look at the product as a market offer, which is made up of different dimensions, price, delivery time, etc., etc. It's not only the product. And somehow, if to define marketing is the process from that product design until the product is consumed and post-sales. So it's everything, in my view. And most importantly, going back to this introduction, the consumer essence. Start out by the consumer. And consumers should then be looked upon as strategic, target focus and profit as a medal thus earned. So if you start by focusing the profit to make, you start out in the wrong end, so to say. And if we look into companies which are listed on the stock exchange, of course, they say our target is to have an ROCE, meaning, of course, return on capital employed, on 25%. Very seldom do we read, our target is to have 98% happy customers, right? And many companies are in the dark. This Swedish company used to have mobile phones some years ago. Then there was a eastern neighbor of ours called Connecting People. And the Finnish friends were smart because they realized, it's important to listen to the customer. But after a while, they missed out on that, and they were beaten up by this company, okay? And think about mobile phones. It's an excellent way to understand when customers are not paid attention to. Ericsson was leaders 24 years ago. Only engineers. And if you look into the Ericsson advertising at the time, it's only about technology. Oh, it's got this much prestanda and this much, who cares? The Finns understood the thing must be beautiful. And then the Americans came and did what they did in a more profitable way. So this was basically my marketing philosophy, some bricks, and now I'm going to turn to these 10 trustworthy typical tendencies of marketing as I see them in 2016. The hypothesis that I posted in the spring and putting today is the following. There are some tendencies out there that some suppliers are more prone to grasp than others. Okay? And this ability to grasp those trends is likely to impact long-term supplier performance. This is my hypothesis. Right or wrong, who knows? And these tendencies, they do not form a coherent whole. Sometimes they overlap. Okay? This is not a theory. Just some thoughts of mine. And some tendencies better understood by some theory-laden models. And we would have had another, 10 evenings to spend together if we go through those, which we won't do. If you come to SSE, we might tell you about that. Okay. And how did I find out about these tendencies? Which method did I use? I mean, academicians like which method to use to find your data. And this method was extremely simple. I chose 2 different journals. One, the Harvard Business Review, slightly more American in the inclination, and the second one, the McKinsey Quarterly, which much fewer business people know about. But if I were to pick one, I think this is slightly more serious. So what I did was that I went through these journals for the last 5 years, and articles which had some impact on marketing. And I detected 10 different tendencies presented here. And this is a mix from both theory and practice. Things happening, companies being profitable, companies not being profitable, etc., etc. So I think it's a good, like a photo of tendencies applying in our days. And so I guess yes. Now I will start to first go them through very fast together, and then we will spend some minutes on each. The first one is digitalization. Surprise. Another one we call big data on the move. The third one is personalization at scale, or what we used to call microsegmentation. Another one is consumer sovereignty, which means consumers being in charge. Yet another one I labeled matching on mutual value. Another one, attention economics. Yet another one, social fragmentation and unification. The proactive shaping of consumer journeys. The return of the local in an era of globalization. And finally, the marketization of society. So these are, in my view, tendencies with a direct impact on marketing that these 2 journals mirror. In 2015, going back to 2016, going back to 2010, 6 years. And according to this hypothesis, companies managing to deal with this in some combination tend to be more profitable and serve their customers better, according to the authors of these 2 journals. It's not proven scientifically, but anyway. So let's start. Digitalization, of course, everyone knows what it is. This could be maybe a definition. The gradual elaboration of business models reflecting absorption of the digital format in everyday life, in everyday social life, by means of information and communication technologies. And of course, some companies that excel here, they are new, and some are old, that find a new way how to prosper. And we can understand this as new ways how supply and demand forces into play in the market. How to produce a good, how it's delivered, and how it's consumed. And of course, this poses both opportunities and threats. Both opportunities and threats, right? And there are a number of examples. And what I come to think of now is a company like Kodak, you might recall, bankrupt 4 years ago. This company is not bankrupt. It's a fascinating Russian company called Kuznets, working with similar image technology. And here, of course, their digital ability, by means of which they could take a picture of me and a Grisha here, and then they could tell how likely is it that we are the same person. It can be used to detect, terrorists at airports, stuff like that, etc., etc. And Kuznets is one of the most proactive companies in this particular vein. Another company is Swedish, called Spotify. I know they are not in Russia. They tried Russia, but they were thrown out basically a year ago. They probably try again. This is digital music. You've got other solutions here. And you've got Zvuk and Yandex Music and Kontakt and so forth. All of those represent this. And Kuznets is an outstanding example that are itself digital. In Spotify's case, it's the distribution that is digital, okay? And they have managed to master this. And one study that was repeated argues that worldwide, if you look into 150 companies and 8 different practices, marketing, HR, and so forth, companies differ substantially. And the conclusion was the following. Incumbents must understand which strategy is available. Incumbents are those who are already in the industry before the newcomers with a high digital maturity enters. The second conclusion was that the digital capabilities invested must be aligned with the overall strategy at hand. You can't just try to be digital in the marketing side unless the whole company is mature in particular cells. And thirdly, the technical capabilities at hand and a strong adaptive culture will make a difference. The people within the company must be ready to adopt this. Otherwise, it will never work with the consumers taking into account. Not rocket science, but anyway, what they found. And the second tendency I call big data on the move. And you might have some experience from this situation. Typically, it's companies making lots of market research, and then they don't know how to use the data that they retrieve. But thanks to the very, very strong tools that information technology today provides us with, we can do much more with big data than before. So hopefully this is less and less of a problem. But to gather the data has never been easier, and to analyze the data has never been easier. Okay? And you can define this as a large volume everyday data permitting business that requires particular attention in order to be of use in terms of tools and models. You can't just push the button, you have to have something else around. And if you talk about big data, there are the 4 V's, which were called some years ago. First, the volume, which kind of data we're talking about, how much, and how much could we distribute. The second one is the variety, what kinds of data, or is it sound, is it pictures, words, letters, blah, blah. Velocity, that's how to analyze the streaming of data. And streaming, that's when you do it concurrently with what's happening. And the fourth one is called veracity, the uncertainty of data. Can we trust it? Is it someone bestowing it upon us without us realizing we're being cheated, etc., etc.? So big data is not only opportunity, but also threat, of course. And of course, this depends on kind of companies, how relevant it is. Avito is a very successful company here. And one of our graduates works there, and he made a thesis on these things. Avito is crucial. And of course, you know what Avito is, you understand. If they are in the position to analyze all the deals being made, they can adapt how they communicate and present how great they are to all those non-users yet. I think a particularly interesting example is Visa, the credit cards. They argue, I'm not sure if it's correct, but they argue that when you make a purchase with your Visa card, you put it in a machine, and it goes back to the Visa headquarters or whatever. They have up to 5,000 different parameters that they evaluate for each purchase. Because as a consumer here, you don't want to be stuck with a card not working, right? You want the card to work. Okay, and the bank don't want you to exceed your limit. And most importantly, you don't want someone to steal your card and to misuse it. So they argue that they have got small stories about each cardholder. They know how I use my card. Okay? And if they suddenly see that my card is used on a striptease show in Vladivostok, that person, it will not work, because I very seldom go to striptease shows or to Vladivostok. And thanks to the way they analyze the data, they understand is if you make odd purchases, they can retrieve it. To me, it was absolutely news when I knew about it. And I think it felt a bit safe, actually, to learn. And, let's move on. Okay, another tendency is what I label personalization at scale, or micro-segmentation, as we used to call it in marketing. This is the proper and exhaustive carrying out those segmentation, segment at the size of 1, okay? By means of with the combination of geodemographics, sociographics, and psychographics variables, originating powerful ICT-enabled market research. Demographics is, of course, age, income, where we live. Sociographics is what strata of society we belong to. And psychographics is, of course, our personalities. So, the knife, by means of which we cut the market into pieces, is becoming sharper and sharper, which means that when we target the segments we want, we are more likely to hit and to make fewer mistakes. Okay? So the knife is becoming sharper when you analyze the market, and when you go for the target audience, you are more likely not to make a mistake, according to this trend. And we can take the example of this fascinating city of Paris, en France. So, this is Paris. And if now you want to sell the toothpaste in Paris, we can say, well, maybe we should focus here, it looks nice. Might work, but it's primitive. Or we can make use of these new high-tech tools. And you end up with the following. This is from a tool called Mosaic. The company is called Experience Marketing Services. And they use this a lot. They look into where people live, how they behave, which cars they buy, which clubs they belong to, where they go for vacation, blah, 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 how they vote. How they vote tells a lot. And they ended up, for instance, in defining 3 different segments. The first one they called Elite Parisienne, those living in the center of Paris, for instance. The second one they called Jeune Famille Active, active families, okay? And the third one they called Petit Ménage en Ville, those living in the countryside. This is just to summarize what they buy and what they appreciate, what they do with their money, okay? And this is much more sophisticated anything we could do before. Okay? And the thing is that before we could focus on each of these things, but thanks to these kind of high-tech tools, they are combined. Okay? And I think it's extremely interesting when they involve what people vote for. Because when you vote, you have to register. You're registered on an address, like in Russia and Sweden, wherever, like. And by knowing where people live and what people vote for in those districts, you can understand a lot about who people are. And I think the service industry is interesting here. And I call it the Italo-American dining paradox. If you go and have a dinner in San Francisco's Marina district, the waitress, she will treat you like a, "Hi, how are you doing?" Okay? Not maybe so personalized. If you go to have the same kind of dinner, maybe in the one in Rome, you never get that shit. You get the very strict treatment. Okay? So in this case, of course, no personalization whatsoever. Here, very personalized, but so, okay? Maybe someone like me treat like this, I prefer this for myself. But anyway, this is enabled, Yandex, of course, you all know about, and my own humble experience is when I come here, I've got the fantastic opportunity to stay at Grand Europe in St. Petersburg. 10 meters before I come into the building, the doorman waits, and I find my strange bath salts in the bath tube when I come, okay? And I feel very well treated. Because, of course, they have the system at the hotel, where they can trace exactly my preferences. So this was not possible before at this scale. And that is the point here. That is why we call it personalization at scale. So it's relatively inexpensive nowadays. Okay, the fourth tendency going on here, I label consumer sovereignty. And this is basically about the relative power of consumers and customers. Historically, consumers had no power. They had to take what was offered. And those of you who grow up in Sweden, you know what I'm talking about. You didn't have too much to choose from. And the same in Sweden in the 1960s, for instance. So basically, many things here. Global hyper-competition, information transparency, and the rising spurt of income. I mean, the consumer is in charge much more today than before. And the classical argument is not new. The classic argument was from the 60s, when Ralph Nader started to challenge American car producers. He argued that American cars kill people. So he was the one who managed to mobilize consumers in the US. And eventually, on a federal level, they introduced demands for safety belts in the cars. It's a typical consumer sovereignty. There was consumer boycotts at the time, right? To force automotive producers to enforce these safety measures. Another example from nowadays is H&M, you might know of. Sorry, a Swedish example, not meant to be what it was. Who, for instance, they sell the carpets, as you know, right? Those carpets are from Pakistan very often. And some years ago it was detected that those carpets are produced by children. What will happen? Stagonia, consumer boycotts, or threatening. They took away all the carpets. So will it be proved? No child labor anymore? From consumers. Would not have happened 20 years ago. So consumers are in charge much more than before. And then you can say, is this a threat to companies or not? Well, you could look upon it that way. And that is how they looked upon it in the US, in the automotive industry. First, I look upon it in the opposite manner. It's a gold mine when you get consumers engaged in your products. Imagine the consumers of age H&M when they found out that those small carpets were not produced by child labor anymore. And these are inspiring examples also from IKEA, obviously. Another dimension of consumer sovereignty is when you put demand together. You pool demand. So you want to buy something, and someone says, well, but there are many Andrews out there. If I can bring all the Andrews together, and then I go to the supplier, we can get a better deal. And the classic example in the US was Groupon. They tried it out in Russia. Mail.ru bought the concept, and now I think it's Adi Klasniki who tried to do it. For some reason, they have a difficult time to be profitable. But it's the same thing. You pool consumer demand, consumers become more powerful. In the previous example, consumers themselves. Here, intermediary tries to put consumers together, to be more powerful towards the supplier. Okay? And to a certain extent, you can say this is the win-win thing. Because consumers, they get a better deal, they pay less, and the supplier might not have sold anything. Right? Typically, at least in Sweden, it is used for traveling off-season. You can go to Turkey now for nothing, for instance. And by the way, no, Russia won't go to Turkey for nothing. So again, I think it's good. Okay, the next tendency here called the matching of mutual value. It's slightly more theoretical, so skip the text here. But you can say the following. If I am the producer, it means I design my offer by putting together different, let's say, bundles here, different conditions of the product, what color, what volume, etc. To produce the product, I have to sustain some costs. People have to sit there and put them together, have to have a lorry, transport them to the shop, etc., etc. Over here, you've got the consumer, and the consumer appreciates some things with the product. Maybe they appreciate the color, maybe they appreciate the price of things so high, maybe they appreciate being able to buy vodka 24 hours a day, for instance. Now, the thing with this tendency is the following. Does this thing match with what the consumer looks for into details? For instance, the money spent by Logitech in designing this thing on the back here, this was probably not for free. It was costly to design this thing. Do I really appreciate it that much as a consumer because it lies better in my hand? Maybe not. Okay? The argument is that, following once again, technology, these things, they tend to match better and less waste in the economy overall. You can jump this on the same. And a number of technologies are drawn upon how to organize the market offer here to make these things match better. And some of them are very well known. Increasing and decreasing the service and non-service component of the product. If you have something very physical, you have an insurance, for instance, when you buy a mobile phone, right? When you buy a service, you get a small pen as a souvenir or something, okay? Adding or deducting service component. The second thing is bundling and unbundling of product attributes, okay? How many attributes do you want to have in the product, okay? If you buy a car, do you want to get the chance to put your cup in a holder? Do you want to be able to have the car in when it's broken, etc., etc.? Consumption, you involve the consumer in the production process. Some furniture companies do that. I don't mention the names. You know what I mean. And suppliers and consumers, they change roles in this respect. Sometimes in this classroom, the faculty member puts himself down there. Students are up here, teaching to the others. Basic example. Did not happen 50 years ago, I'm sure. To what extent do these measures make the supplier stand out? How could you be different from others? Well, that's the question. And this is typically how you used to have a furniture. Then this gentleman, Ingvar Kamprad, he said, okay, let's sell things into pieces to the IKEA consumer. And then another company said, well, we are here to put together the IKEA furniture. So you see, putting it together, taking it apart, putting it together. So companies could play with this, okay? Much more than before. And you all know about low-cost carriers, very well an example. And I'm going to tell about the most telling example. This one, of course, you know. You all know Aeroflot since childhood. You might know Pageda since a few years. Oh, fantastic. It was great. It's absolutely, basically, Nichiro, that is, go with, the only thing is that what Pageda did was that to have those prices, they unbundled the offer in the extreme. So that with these prices, you're almost only allowed to go on the plane being naked. Exaggerate. So then you get this, and Alexander is sort of pissed off here because he had to pay to bring his little, portfolio on board for 3,000 rubles. And some also say that when you discuss this with the Pageda people, they are very angry. So in this case, you could argue that Pageda is playing with his, attributes a bit too much. Maybe smart or not, I don't know. I'm just saying that to unbundle these things too much is not just to do it to make money from it. Because here they created lots of customer dissatisfaction. People are not ready to pay 3,000 rubles to bring their normal things on board and stuff. So, I can drop this one, I think. Yes, attention economics. That is another of these sort of tendencies. And it's been around for a while. It's not, I've heard this for I think 50 years or so, but it still keeps pervading the discourse here. Attention is the scarce resource, and that one has to be somewhat mobilized. This is a Nobel Prize laureate who spoke about that. And basically then, to be successful in the marketplace, these authors, they argue that you have to have both be able, to look into the sky to see the global trends which are happening. You have to see the immediate landscape close to you, and you have to use the microscope, okay? Otherwise, you will not be able to get the consumer's attention. Attention is so scarce. They call it market surgery, basically. And now it's much more easy also to go for this. And here they call it advertising as a service, because advertising helps you out to find out what there is out there in the market. According to these authors. Yes, a good, to understand it, a good, I think, parallel is to look at a cocktail party. You only have one chance to make a first impression. And they argue that this characterizes markets in our day, attention economy. You don't grasp that opportunity, you are basically lost in the consumer's mind. Share, compare, and rate. I can jump. Yeah, these are two YouTube stars now, very strange. This is a Swedish guy who earns 3 million pounds a year by doing nothing on YouTube. This is his Russian colleague, Kate Clapp. It's absolutely crap in my mind, but people listen to them, but they don't listen to suppliers, so the word is a bit strange. Okay, the next tendency, we're approaching that now, it was called social fragmentation and unification. This is the opposite forces of hyperdivision and unified, strengthening one another. And this is very much corresponding to the heterogeneity in demand. People are very different in what they demand from suppliers, okay? And then this is, let's say, met by suppliers using a modular philosophy in what they do. For us, for instance, in SSE, we know that all the people in the progress, they want different things. We have got small building blocks for marketing, finance, etc. We combine those building blocks in different ways, depending on who is out there. And without those small blocks, it would be impossible to deliver programs with an economy at all. You can jump this. I think, yes. So this is another real example, a Russian dating site that some might have visited called Top Place. I'm not sure if it works, but it's there. Anyway. When you talk about this social fragmentation, one extremely interesting, I think, idea is that of the long tail. And the long tail concept means the following, that if this is number of results, okay, if you look for instance, for a certain, how many people are searching a typical, a song in the internet, okay? Well, some songs are thought after by very many people. They can produce, discs they sell well. But some songs are only sought after by very few people. Historically, to find these products is impossible. And nowadays, it's very, very easy. It's just to download and to buy it in the App Store or whatever. So the long tail argument has it that more and more products could be found and had in an, let's say, eternal specificity here. Everyone could find what they want, even though most people are still here. But you can make money also from being out here. And that was not possible before. And this goes in hand-in-hand with globalization, because if there's only, let's say, 2 people in the world who want this song, and they live one in India and one in Sweden, I think those 2 could meet here and enrich each other's life, or something similar. Let's say. Yes, and the 3D printing, of course, as some of you know about, is the ultimate example, I think, of this. And now you can print the car. It seems very strange to me. I'm not an engineer. But of course, if you print the car, imagine how specific you can make that car. I want a car with 10,000 colors. No problem, according to this technology. Yes, I think it's interesting also to look at how media works nowadays. Very few people, or fewer and fewer, I should say, read the actual paper. Instead, they got the RSS feeds. And when we had this class in May, in this room, 4 out of 40 people were regularly reading a printed newspaper. I was one of the 4, so it's also my age, I guess. And I can jump this one as well. What's interesting is the following. To tie these things together and to understand how it works, I argue we should know more of sociological theory. And here there are lots of models to build upon, which we will not do now. The last tendency is what I call the proactive shaping of consumer journeys, which means that companies, they basically realize the opportunities to influence the consumer do not arise in a traditional funnel-like manner across transactions, but could instead be practically created by means of ongoing interaction, thus forming a relationship. This is how we sell our products here, and also like that's got start when you come in as a consumer into the insurance business. They have needs to follow you from day one forever. And this is how we, for instance, monitor our applicants. I mean, it's very basic, so there's no high tech, really, but to make them become a client. And it's not that people, it's not that people move down the funnel like this in a prescribed way. Instead, it's like more seen like this. So you follow the consumer all along, which is a bit more crucial, according to those tendencies. Okay, so now we're approaching the very end. And what we also see nowadays is that even though we live in a global environment, more and more local components appear in market offers. And one example is Dogby Draft in Russia, for instance. Okay, so even though we are born global as you are, there is still space to emphasize what is more local. And I think, as you know, these of my favorite examples, absolute vodka and whiskey standards. Absolutely, they try to be local in places where they're not local. It's quite interesting. So they twisted the argument around many years ago, nothing new. And whiskey standards, they go to Paris with Russian snow, and they bring Russian ice to New York. So they twist everything here, which is a bit odd, maybe, but anyway, it happens. And it matters because local means something is genuine, according to most consumers. So the last thing here is what I call the marketization of society. That the market is gaining ground in lots of areas. We mentioned before, education, we've got energy, healthcare, and pensions. So even though we do not like everything that the market produces with its mechanisms, the market pervades society much more. I know that in Russia you are not yet choosing any supplier to the extent that you plan to do. In Sweden we can choose from 25 different electricity suppliers, which is a problem, because who is interested to choose electricity supplier? It's very boring. But we are forced to. If you don't choose, you are punished by paying a higher rate. So, if you want to have some examples of interesting companies here, you can look at this. This is the Swish iSettle. These are paying solutions. This is SSE graduate job of the year. Klarna is how you pay your bills. Also, SSE graduate. Ekvid is a Russian way for small companies how to have a virtual store, virtual cash register. Skype and Singaya are, phone calls for free. Septolab and King, Russian, Swedish, extremely successful gaming companies worth billions. And of course, you all know about Booking.com and Russian Octago. All of them embody these tendencies, and they do quite well, as far as I understand. So basically, that was what I intended to present tonight. Thanks for your attention, and now I guess, Anna, there will be some scope for questions, or you have to moderate the rest.
I think that we all have some questions and reflections to share with us, because we are sitting in the setup of executive being and usually all tables are participating actively in discussions, and Anders should be more than happy to continue discuss questions that are interested. But also, wonderful.
Everything is yes now. Amazing. Then we can cut all marketing. Fantastic. Finally, I reached my goal. Great.
So Anders, what is marketing?
What is marketing? Yeah?
Finally.
I think actually I mentioned it in slide number 6 or something. I think it's the whole process from starting to reflect upon a consumer problem until the consumer continues to consume the product that your ideas eventually matured into. I think it's the whole product, the whole chain, and I think it is your thinking about the consumer must be part of the whole chain. That is true. That is true marketing. But to pay attention to the consumer is both sometimes very costly and also risky. So we have to make compromises, and we know that. The question is, which compromises do we do, still being able to call it somewhat customer-oriented? And I think that's the 20 million ruble question to ponder upon. Because it depends, of course, which consumer you're talking about. Everyone is very, very different, and you cannot fulfill the desires and needs of everyone, and you can't have unique solutions for everyone. But some of the tools here presented, they will facilitate being more consumer-oriented all through the chain, I think. But it's interesting to consider when you start to design an offer for the market, you start to think about the product, let's say. I always argue that we should go, of course, and ask the consumer, in a special way, which I could elaborate, but forget about that. The trick is that if we only ask the consumer, how will anything ever change? Because consumers and humans are extremely stubborn. They're like kids, they want the same thing. Very few people, maybe except for Ludmilla, are wanting new things to try out. And there is an argument, I think, of the author of the book Business Study Funk, Kjell Nordström, and he argues that the consumer is stupid. If we would have listened to the consumer, we would not even have had the telefax in the 70s. We'd only had telex. Because if you had telex, you might remember pictures, telex how it worked. Having only telex, you cannot imagine what a telefax is, or even less internet, right? And I think that's really the one of the challenges for marketing, to be consumer-oriented all through the chain, but still sometimes not to listen to the consumer, because the consumer is conservative. And I mean, if you would ask me about technologies, I mean, I'm probably among those who said, the internet, I mean, that's just for this week, it's advantage tomorrow. So I'm happy I'm happy I was not so successful. So. Yes, please.
Actually, it's not a question about consuming, but it's a question about people who stop consuming.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way, like I gave up watching TV a couple of years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I haven't seen much of advertisement apart from some billboards, but that's not very interesting, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's becoming increasingly difficult to convince people to buy something if they refuse to do that. Like I have, let's say, iPhone 5. And I know that I don't want a new one because I see no point. So it doesn't matter how much marketing you throw on me. Right now, I do not go and buy any other iPhone. So the idea is, when do you, as a person, when you go shopping and when you buy something, when do you stop consuming? How do you make these decisions now that you are a marketing professional?
Okay. No? It's an interesting observation, and I think very many of us feel like that's a saturation, that we don't want to. That is why, companies, they spend so much money in vain. They have no impact, and some even negative. I don't want to see another Apple, display on the billboard, for instance. I think what I hope I do, but of course, I'm cheated like all of you, except for you, but I think, but seriously, what is more and more having an impact, I think, is that you trust those who are close to you, your friends, and this word of mouth. And word of mouth has been around for very many years, but word of mouth is, I think, becoming even more important, because credibility is a problem otherwise, and we see that a lot. Good point. When we have the information sessions for our programs here, so that's the example. We used to have the kid, I was on the podium, okay? And we sold some programs, of course. But then we took myself away. And now we work much more with alumni. People already went into the programs because more credibility. I'm biased. I get my salary because people come here, right? Alumni do not. So I think listening more and more to those who are close to you, that is what I hope I do. And if you ask people, that is what they say they want to do. But I'm absolutely sure I'm more seduced than anyone in this case. And I think it's interesting because if you look at all those tools, companies today, they could do much more than they could do 20 years ago. But do we as consumers, do we want them to be so informed about us as individuals? I'm not so sure. For instance, if you go to your local grocery store, at least where I live, they can see exactly what I buy. It's no secret. So they can follow my way of life. You know? If I get a kid, if I divorce, if I get a dog, everything. And some years ago, they did not use it. But today they use it. I mean, all you probably get very customized offers in your mobile phones regarding go to the store with a special discount on the product you used to buy. Okay? And some say, yeah, that's a service to the consumer. But do you really want them to follow you so closely? I'm not so sure. I don't have a problem with it, but I mean, in general. So even though you don't look at the billboards, they still follow you. And it's hard to get rid of unless you only pay cash, I guess. That's the way to avoid it if you really want to. So.
This is again understanding customer, because they are changers, they behave differently, they understand differently, and we have to follow.
Yeah. But sometimes we want to carve out our own destiny. We don't want them to tell us. But they we can assist you. No, we know that the autumn is coming. You want to go to Turkey because you went the last year, maybe something like that. And I think it's highly problematic from an ethical point of view, actually. In my country, we used to have some legislation long ago, but that legislation did not fit with the new digital reality because it's tricky to. It's much easier to have market communication legislation for print. It's much more difficult for things that you can see like that in your phone, for instance. So it's.
I think speaking about ethics and intrusion into one's personal life, it should be observed that a lot of companies they overstep a certain ethical threshold. For example, Apple. iPhone 5 will not survive it anymore because we'll have to stick to the reality in terms of technology. You'll not be able to upload to it iOS 7. It's not technologically fit. It will not work. So you have to buy a new one if you want to be a customer of Apple. So this is how they manipulate it.
Tricky thing.
And even though maybe we don't want to stay, we say, okay, I realize I'm being manipulated, but I don't want to spend, let's say, lots of time into it. Easy, I go buy a new one, and that fixes the problem for me. And they know that, of course. So,
And this is more and more emotional than rational.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
Everything is emotional.
Yeah,
You do
more
emotional,
and more.
and then you justify rationally. First you do an emotional thing, but justification is rational. You will explain why you did that in a rational way, but what you did was emotional.
But proportionally, emotion makes sense more and more when we buy. Because we don't need anything. Honestly. I don't need to buy any dress, just new for marketing. I don't need it. Rationally, I don't need it.
And of course, I mean,
Still,
the companies play with that. Yes, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Like, those rules about like what music to play, what kind of music they need to play in order to sell sportswear or clothes for weddings, and how to put the light. If you observe it, it's all targeting your emotions, basically.
But it's very interesting to talk about the consumer as an intelligent creature or a non-intelligent creature. I think that's interesting. And when you get this very, very, very fundamental, let's say, basically paper-based communication in your post box, buy free paper too. Okay? Oh, I'm too smart to follow those things. I'm a smart person, right? What do I say? Okay? And then I made an experiment in the U.S. It was actually in San Francisco, when they had a fake advertising for something. There was a number you could call and buy the product, so to say. The product didn't exist, but never mind. And then they wanted to challenge this thing about us being intelligent. And they distributed these things first in one of the, let's say, very low-income districts of San Francisco, where you could have the hypothesis that people are less educated, okay? and then they distribute it in Berkeley, where the university is located. People are very smart. Smart. And who were the ones who bought the most? The Berkeley. So we are much more stupid. And the explanation from a scientific point of view was the following: that the people with less education, they're more alert, not to be cheated. The smart ones, they're not alert because they can't cheat me out of smart. Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah. So there are lots of interesting examples, and of course these things have been around, and I mean for not forever, but for very many years. But these tendencies, they put them on the table, and technology makes them more relevant. And I mean that's the takeaway from today. That these things are more to react as a supplier. Yeah, we can make more money from it, maybe. As a consumer, sometimes to pay more attention. Or sometimes, as was said here, advertising as a service to get more help according to our particular requirements. Yes?
A case and a question. A month ago, me and my partner were arguing about launching a new product. And there were two different points of view. I said that let's make a survey among our clients using our call center in order to understand how will it go. And he said, no way, that won't work. Let's do it in a Steve Jobs way. People don't know what they want, let's give it what we want. So, two different approaches, and the thing is, speaking about Russian businessmen, also the owners of the company, they say that, oh, let's do it that way, that will be cool. Because they think that they represent most of the people. And on the other side, once my friend said, why people buy this thing? Me, for example, all my friends, all my colleagues don't do it that way. And then I asked him, are you playing Pokemon Go? He said, no. I said, so many people are playing and you know, that doesn't mean that it won't go. So how to find the right balance?
It's the classical question of market research then. And exactly, I mean, I just say that either, I mean, you can, one option is to guess what your partner wants to guess. We just have a try. You know, you can guess. And what is the advantage of guessing? Yeah, it's very cheap. You know? But one not so well known disadvantage if you guess. It's very hard to understand what you did correct if you guess, right? But if you do it your way, and if you succeed or if you fail, at least you know why. Because you did ask people something. Okay, ask the wrong questions, probably, or something like that. But to ask is more costly. And when I hear this thing, because I very often hear this to Steve Jobs, he did this to the customer, which I think is not really true, because of course they did, right? But you never hear about all the Steve Jobs that were guessing and that absolutely failed. Those we don't know, right? Those we don't know. I think it depends a lot about how well you know your market in the first place. How well you know the people that you target out there, and how much resource you can dispose. Because even though you make a market research and you fail ultimately, at least you learn something about the people out there. If you just speculate and guess, you learn that, okay, I was an egghead, that's it. And that's not such a good thing to learn, really. So, but it's a classical thing now. So now you took a chance now. Or what was the decision?
Well, the approach was the following. We have evaluated the test. Well, for example, it's 1 million. Mm-hmm. And we decided, let's risk it or not. That's the case. Now, after the test, we will understand, and it starts on the 1st of October. Okay. Will it work or not?
In that case, also, of course, you can, if you have the resources to have tests, pilot phase in some areas, and for some reason, some people look at Stockholm as an interesting area for digital products. So Stockholm has been the victim, so to say, of very many trials. They try to sell something digital in the area, how do these people react? Because they are early adopters. If they don't buy it, then we could, discontinue. So to find, this is another advice, to find appropriate trial cohort of people. And it could be your friends, but the risk with your friends is they're very similar to you, right? It was one of the publishers I happened to listen to some years ago. The publisher was in a meeting like this. He was the publisher of the main Gazeta in Sweden, okay? The biggest one. And he was extremely intellectual. He was extremely intellectual, very smart. Whereas the Gazeta was very low, about tits and sex and crimes and stuff like that. And people asked him, how could you, as an intellectual, like people in this room, how could you sell this shit? And he said, he looked at him, well, you are talking bad about many people here. If you mean ourselves in this room, we, the intellectuals, like myself, how many people do you think we make up in Sweden? 200,000. What about the rest? 8.8 million. Those are the ones, So if you are too close to yourself, you don't see the rest. And I think that was what you have to listen to your friends. But you're a minority, and often you want to spread out. So it's risky to listen too much to those who are close when it comes to offering something. As a consumer, I think it's fabulous. Because if your friends are okay with it, most likely you will be.
All the risky and adventure.
Yeah.
Sanders, at
Yeah.
the very beginning of this seminar,
Yes.
you mentioned that Russia is the home of the poorest marketing example and the most elegant tool.
Yeah. In my view.
Yes, in your Western view.
Yes. No, not West, my view, in my view.
All right.
We agree with you.
Could you share with us the most elegant recent example? What excited you? Quite recently?
No, I'm still, and some of you know why, I'm still stuck with Whiskey Standard. I think Whiskey Standard at the time, I think it was fabulous. You had a tradition here of vodka, Starishnaya, which is not so sophisticated. I mean, vodka was great, but not sophisticated, this green label that. And still, this gentleman, whatever his name now is, managed to have this concept, building some Russianness into it. And that appealed to Russians, obviously, right? And it also started to appeal abroad. And I think that was amazing, because the product is extremely basic. And that is why I also think Absolute is a good example, right? And even the Absolute and Ruski Standard argue, well, you don't get a hangover from our vodka because of that now. Well, who knows if it's true? I think that's a fantastic example of a Russian company excelling. And also, if you look at the worst, marketing, I would also go for vodka ads here 15 years ago, when you had motorcycles and nude ladies and stuff like that, actually. And I think that was very smart, because maybe they looked somewhat at what Absolute did, I don't know. But they managed to transform it into a Russian context, I think, with a very high level of credibility for a Russian audience. What is interesting is that, as you might know, some of you, we had the marketing director of Ruski Standard, was one of our students in the second year, Danil, yeah. And they were going to have a project with they only had the first Ruski Standard variant, right? It's a premium vodka. And then he had, as his thesis in the program, he was going to launch a premium, calling it platinum or something, yeah? And that was their idea in the group, and I was supposed to be some kind of opponent. Oh, stupid idea, idiots, not go to work. It's already premium. And you all know what happened. I mean, thanks to that and many other measures, they broadened the brand. So I told him that's why I should be in the classroom and not in the business market. Really. So I think, yes, I think Joseph Stalin is a great example, actually.
The last chance to know anything else from others?
Thank you a lot for the presentation. I just want to ask about marketing differences
or marketing in the pharmaceutical industry. So as you're from that industry, so do you have any, like issues about the pharmaceutical marketing?
Yeah, of course, it's that's a challenge, of course, because we got OTC products and RX products. We have the prescription, okay, and there are different laws in different countries what you're allowed to do. In many countries, if you visit the website, you have to, like for beverages, you have to sign in that you are about 18 and you're not a drug addict or something. So it's very tricky. So what they do, of course, they care much less for the RX. They only care about the doctors, right? And the way that they communicate with the doctors, it's also a function of the rules. I'm not sure about Russia, but let's put it this way. My sister is a doctor in Sweden, and she went abroad much more 10 years ago. Because 10 years ago, those companies that were organizing congresses and seminars in very sunny places all around. Now they're not allowed to by Swedish law anymore. Okay, so now they can almost not offer a coffee to the medical doctor anymore. And I think that's probably, from a moral point of view, it's okay. My sister thinks it's boring, but anyway. From the over-the-counter products, the OTC, then of course it's very different. And I think it also depends how you access those products. And here once again, I don't know about Russian rules, but where I come from, since 2 years or since 4 years, you can buy like a paracetamol in your grocery store, for instance, right? So you can be much closer to the consumer in that way. So of course, then it's much more interesting for them to behave like any sort of supplier. But my feeling is that at least in Sweden, the pharma companies are quite reluctant to exaggerate. But then if they exaggerate, being too pushy, they know that politicians will legislate. So they try to, just be very, very soft in those areas. What about Russia? Do you have lots of pharma advertising here?
It's really different because we do not have pharma advertising, but we can buy anything in the grocery store.
Okay.
So, but we cannot have any advertising on TV, on radio.
Okay. Now it's interesting because these the pharma companies. Imagine how much they spent on medical doctors before organizing these conferences abroad. They spent a lot. And of course, the doctors only said, "Well, now we are more informed that we can be a better doctor and so forth, and get nice sometimes or whatever."
That's a little bit sophisticated question to understand who is consumer in pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah,
who is
supply.
Exactly.
Is it about doctors, patients? It's very good, and we used to have. I used to have on my exams, who is the customer to the pharma industry? Of course, the patient somewhat, the doctors, the taxpayer, the politician, the pharmacy owner. It's very complicated, very complex. And of course, when pharmaceutical companies direct their market communication, when they deal with people, they have to deal with all of these in some kind of a combination. So it's pretty tricky actually. And you have also different traditions, different countries. I recently was in France, and France is the country in the world where they consume most drugs per capita, okay? And one reason for that is that in France, all pharmacies, they are private. And in all small French villages in the middle of nowhere, there's always a pharmacy, right? So you can easily access it all over, all the time, and people consume more. And is that really ethical, or, hard to say, I think. But pharma is a good example when you think about the controversies surrounding market communications. But sometimes, of course, it's good to understand what do I need, how could I use it? And if the pharmacist can't help me, how do I then find out? Okay, so thank you very much to all you here, and thanks to you if anyone is left in cyberspace. for listening and for being around, and hope to see you around in other circumstances with Stockholm School of Economics in the future. And best of luck out there in the fascinating landscape marketing. That's it.